Well, the Minnesota Wild got goalie tonight, Connor Hellebuyck. Only one goal allowed despite 40-plus shots by the Minnesota Wild offensively. You can really boil this game down to a couple of key moments, as you can in many playoff caliber games. So let's dive in and discuss the particulars on tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. Minnesota Wild fall by a score of 4-1. Let's break it down.
You are Locked On Wild Postcast, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Minnesota Wild fall by a score of 4-1 to the New York Jets. The Winnipeg Jets here tonight as Connor Hellebuyck turns in one of his better performances of the entire season en route to keeping the Wild completely off the board after the first period. And tonight's Locked On Wild postcast is underway. Let's start with the captain of the comments section. Denny is here. And so let's hear everybody's thoughts as to what we saw in tonight's game. I'm going to start with AJ. Can't really complain too much about this game. Beaten by Hellebuyck, not necessarily by the Jets themselves. And you look at the numbers. I'm going to read you the goals saved above expected in this game tonight because Connor Hellebuyck had just a disgusting performance in this game. The Minnesota Wild managed 4.6 expected goals in this game. And I'm pretty sure that's a season high for the last couple of seasons for the Minnesota Wild in terms of expected goals. The Wild only scored once. And so Connor Hellebuyck was a 3.63 goals saved above expected. The Wild generated 44 shots on goal. They generated a ton of high danger looks in this one as well. So offensively, there's really not much you can ask for. The Wild had 7 high danger chances in this game alone. And that is a mark that sometimes teams don't get for multiple games. And yet they did that here tonight. And so offensively, they did enough. Connor Hellebuyck just did not relent. After the Wild scored the first goal of the game, he just shut the door. And that's what good goalies do. The Winnipeg Jets also kind of took the wind out of the sails in the third period. The Wild didn't have a shot on goal through the first 11 minutes of the third period. So credit to the Jets defense for doing their job as well. This is how the Winnipeg Jets have won games all season, is they get the early lead and they rely on their goaltending and defense to be able to just shut the opponent down the stretch. And that's why they're 18-4. It's not a fluke. It's a very good Winnipeg team. I don't think they're going to play at this pace for the entirety of the season, but so far this year, they're clicking on all cylinders, and that's a credit to them playing in their system and to having one of the best goalies on the planet who is just going to dominate in the Four Nations face-off when he is named the starter for Team USA. He's going to be named the starter. Like we don't even have to speculate about that. Creepy Colors trying to look at this game with a level head, but it was frustrating. It was a frustrating game, but I'm not going to overreact or react, honestly, to this one really in any way, because let's look at the key things that led to, let's look at the key turning points for this game. So you have that weird play where Joel Eriksson-Ek gets tangled up behind the Winnipeg net, and Yakov Trenin tries to kind of help get it sorted out with him, which leads to a 4-on-3 for the Jets coming down the other way, which leads to space for Nino Niederreiter to be able to score to give the Jets the 2-1 lead at that point. That was, I think, the turning point of the game, because if you're battling to a 1-1 tie, it's way different than if you are trying to come from behind. And if the Wild don't give up that goal, maybe there's a situation in which they can get the go-ahead goal to make it 2-1. But especially with how much pressure was put on Connor Hellebuyck early, the Wild had 22 shots in the first period. Like, they did plenty to start the game to try to get him off his rhythm. They just couldn't crack that egg in this game, and that's going to happen from time to time. So the Wilds, as the second and the third periods unraveled, it did seem like Winnipeg gained more and more control as the game unfolded, and they made life difficult for the Wild down the stretch. But it was the power play goal. When you're down 2-1, you give up a power play goal with 5 minutes left in the game. That's a backbreaker. And Jake Middleton, I know he did score tonight, but he had that feed up the ice where he goes to the right side of the net. Just couldn't bury it. Couldn't bury that one. It kind of fell off his stick. And that's an opportunity where if the Wild can get that one, maybe they're able to turn the tide. Maybe they're able to get momentum on their side enough to be able to pull the game in their favor. But it's just these battles, like we talked about the process for this Wild team in going from getting just completely like laughed off the ice in these games over the last season plus. The games have been competitive. I know the final score tonight doesn't indicate that. The games have been competitive so far this year. You lose close to Winnipeg and Dallas, and then this one, 2 goals in the final 5 minutes to push it to 4-1. But it was basically a 2-1 game for a majority of the second and the third period. So still very competitive. And it underscores, and Denny is exactly right here. I'm going to fast forward to his comments here before I backtrack. It shows it's just a Wild team that I think they need some additional scoring to complement the defense that they're playing and the goaltending that they're getting. The defense, best in the league in 5-on-5 scoring, fewest amount of 5-on-5 goals given up in the NHL. That's not a fluke. We're 20 games in, and so the identity for this team, good defense, good goaltending, and players need to step up to match the scoring that Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy have provided so far. Getting another piece to add to that mix and then having Matt Zuccarello come back when he's healthy is, I think, what's going to make this Wild team into a team that has playoff caliber defense and goaltending to a team that can do both. And that's what the Wild need to be to win these games against the likes of Dallas, Winnipeg, Colorado when we get there, although Colorado goaltending again had a night. They gave up 8 goals to the Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't know about that Colorado team. That goaltending situation is porous at best, and I don't know if they're going to get that fixed by the time the season is done unless they find a way to go get John Gibson from Anaheim. That Colorado team might have more problems than they have answers. And Nashville continues to take 1 step forward, 2 steps back. We've said it. The everydayers have been listening to the show and have heard me say it multiple times. The West is pretty open. Other than Winnipeg and Dallas, which the Wild have battled, you need to go get some scoring to help out. Bubba's sports cards. I mean, they have a brick wall. Their fourth line, Iafollo, gets 2 goals. Kind of hard to beat a Jets team when their fourth line being as good as their first. Yeah, that was another key in this matchup. Was the Kaprizov line was basically the combination of Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, up and down the list. None of those guys able to get on the score sheet. But then you look at Winnipeg, too, and none of their top guys did. Their top line continues to struggle at 5-on-5. And so it's all about what you get for that depth scoring. And the Wild just did not get as much depth scoring as Winnipeg did tonight. And that's why Winnipeg came away with the win. But those are the things that the good teams do, is when their top lines get shut down, the rest of the team comes to the party. And they bring the party favors, they get the goals, and that's how you win. Big tickets, KG21. First period, great. Second, average. Third, terrible. I vehemently disagree with the first part of that second sentence. I see. This is something too that I hear quite often from fans. I see it on social media too. That because the Wilds got beat on their home ice, they're not a serious team. So pack in the season and just be done. Just tank. Just trade players away. If you just hit the pause button, if you just hit the eject button on every season at the moment that things don't go perfectly well, at the moment you lose the first game of the season, no one would ever win a cup. And so I don't agree that it's not a serious Wild team. What are the expectations? Are the expectations that they would be at this point 21-0? It was a 2-1 game with 5 minutes to play, and Winnipeg got a power play goal to push it out of reach. Beyond that, it was competitive. Winnipeg, because they're a good team, they started to take the lanes away, and that's just what they do. Like, this is part of the process. This is part of the process for this Minnesota Wild team, is making adjustments to how these teams play. Like, you don't just throw your hands up in the air and say, well, we can't beat them. We're not a serious team. I do not agree with that. Optics. We got to start talking about it. It's a very real possibility that Winnipeg is involved in some sort of witchcraft, maybe a deal with the devil. Well, it's early in the season, 22 games in. It's a Winnipeg team that's playing fantastically well, but they've also been pretty lucky on the injury front. Injuries are the great equalizer. There's a lot of time left in the season. Amanda, I'm not disappointed with this game at all. We have more shots on net versus the last two games combined. And this too from Nathan, 0-3 against the Jets and the Stars so far. I take solace in the fact that the games have been closer as opposed to just getting routed like the Wild did last year. So that's a step in the right direction, but it's not wrong. At some point, the Wild are going to need to win these games. They're going to need to pick up more than 1 point occasionally in these games. You got to flip these in your favor. It's playoff hockey, and we get a great example tonight of what happens in playoff hockey. It often comes down to 1 or 2 moments in a game where you either keep your composure or you lose it and you end up giving up a goal that is ultimately the backbreaker. And that's what happened tonight. That play with Joel Eriksson Ek getting tangled up in front of the Winnipeg net and Yakov Trenin back there to try to kind of help sort things out. I don't disagree with standing up for a teammate, but it's a situational thing. And Winnipeg took advantage there. They got a little mini power play and they score. That was ultimately the deciding goal in the game. But at the same time, that's the lesson to take, is to stay even keel. John Hines has preached that quite a bit this season, is staying even keel and not allowing these types of moments to leak in. And that's what happened tonight. So I'm not going to get too riled up about this game. So hopefully anybody that stopped in hoping that I would declare the season over, sorry to let you down. It's an early test. The Wild have 60 more of them, 61 more games before this regular season is over to try to learn from these situations. They will play Winnipeg again, and this is part of the ebb and flow of the season. I think Winnipeg is good, but nowhere near as good as their record. Hellebuyck is basically in the matrix and sees things happen before they happen. Anyone else in net, and we get at least 3 goals. Yeah. Expected goals of 4.6 tonight, which is the highest mark I've seen in a while. just ran into the hot goalie. And they took Minnesota out of their system in the third, especially. No shots on goal through the first 11 minutes of the game. That's another lesson too. You got to just keep pushing. You got to fight through it. And the Wild did not. But it doesn't change. It doesn't change what's happened so far this season. You got to get those games though at some point. That's what I'll say. You got to find a way to pick those games up at some point this season. Just for everywhere in their every part of their process. You just get a game against Winnipeg later on in the season, and that will that'll help get everybody back to where things should be. Important to remember expectations for the season. We were hoping playoffs. Now we're number 2 in the league, in the conference. We're way ahead of our dynasty window, which will start not next year, but the year after. Optics is not wrong here. You've got prospects in the pipeline that will be able to inject some life into this roster over the next couple of seasons. And it's all about, I think it's all about the next probably calendar year. What the Wild do the rest of this season, what they do in the off season, and what they do pre-trade deadline next season is going to impact the trajectory of their franchise for the next decade. With the Kirill Kaprizov decision, with how things are handled at the trade deadline this year, with what the Wild do in free agency next year. They want to have they want big impact moves in free agency to help facilitate where this team wants to go. So look at it that way, that from now until the trade deadline, through the end of the season, into the off season, and up to the trade deadline next year, like this is the Wild should be looking to try to make that as competitive of a window as they can and let everything else fall in place as it comes together. Mojo has got to go. What did Mojo have tonight? 4 shots on goal. He played 16 minutes, picked up an assist, and was even on the scoreboard here in this one. He helped facilitate the Jake Middleton goal, and that was after his 8-shot performance against the Calgary Flames. I had to double check it. 8 shots on goal. But this is the thing with Marcus Johansson, and Alex and I talked about this yesterday, is you get these stretches where you're like, okay, we could work with this. And you have these other stretches of just quiet play. I'd like to see that evened out a little bit to where, you know, maybe you can get a couple more games of good play strung together and eliminate some of those quiet stretches. He's been firing the shots on net over the last few games, which is exactly what we've been asking him to do, but you just got to consistently do it over the course of a full season. And so that's been an issue. And with Matt Zuccarello out of the lineup, you got to get more. So he's done it the last 2 games, but it needs to continue for this team to be able to keep pace with Winnipeg. Now 6 points behind them, but still a couple points clear of the Dallas Stars and 6 points clear of the Colorado Avalanche. Guerin visited Hellebuyck after the game. Apparently Team USA GM saw this as starter. Yeah. It was either going to be Hellebuyck or Ottinger. And I just would go Hellebuyck. Like if it were me, that's an easy decision for me, is just Hellebuyck's the starter. Ottinger can give you a change of pace. And that's how I do it. Good call by Optics here. The Rangers have evidently which is weird because where are the New York Rangers in the standings? Like they're still in a top. They're still in one of the. They have slipped to fourth. Okay, so they're a little bit behind the pack, and they're looking to make some roster changes, try to inject some life into the roster. Amazing how after the success they've had the last couple of seasons that they are starting to get antsy. But hey, it's a New York team. What do you expect? Chris Kreider, though, I wouldn't do it. $6.5 million for the next 2 seasons after this. He's a prolific goal scorer, but he's also 33. He's got 9 goals in 19 games and no assists. I would rather somebody else take a chance on him as opposed to having to deal with that contract in addition to all the other contracts that the Wilds currently have on their books. What are you going to give up for Brock Nelson? He's going to be 34, so you aren't signing him long term. So Nelson would be a rental, not a rental guy. Pass. The rumored trade package is a 2025 first-round pick and a 2025 conditional third for Brock Nelson. But here's the deal. Before this one tonight, so you're either in on trades or you're out. My mind isn't changed by what we saw tonight. In fact, my mind is probably more convinced that in order for the Wild to be contenders this year, they're going to need to go find somebody to inject into this group. Just need some more scoring. And a 2025 first is a steep price, but the Wilds have a boatload of prospects. They have a glut of prospects. At some point, when is enough? They're not all going to make the team. So maybe if you can convince the New York Islanders to take a prospect as opposed to a pick, maybe you do that. But the teams that continue to just stockpile prospects, how's that worked for Anaheim? I mean, how's that working for San Jose? How's that working for Chicago? At some point, you just... I just, after what happened last year and seeing the pieces, seeing the things that this team has leaned on for wins, I'd go make a move. I'm not afraid of that price, but that's entirely like everybody's opinion is going to be different on that. And I'm not going to try to sway anybody because everybody views this season through a different lens. My personal opinion is that I would like to see them bring somebody in, but this is the next 2 months. The next 2 months are going to decide if that is something that is worthwhile or not. If the Wilds get stuck in the mud for December and January, then yeah, I probably wouldn't make a trade. But based on what I've seen through the first 20 games, get these guys some help. Give them a little injection of energy and applaud them for their efforts so far. They're still only a 4 regulation loss team. 30 points is now tied with Vegas for second in the entire Western Conference. You're 13-4-4. One of just 5 teams in the Western Conference to hit 70 goals so far this season. And 54 goals allowed is the 3rd fewest in the entire Western Conference. These are the trademarks of a good team. They're not quite at the level of Winnipeg or even Dallas, but they're close. And close is way better than they were last year. They were not close last night. Denny is A+ right here. 1 line tonight. And that's not a combination to win games. You got to have more lines. You got to have more lines in on the party to be able to come away with wins in this age of the NHL. It'd be nice if the Wild would play 3 periods. First period, they took extra strides to beat Winnipeg to the puck. After the first, they started coasting and getting beat. Yeah, it's Winnipeg played their game, and they got the Wilds out of their structure and system. But that's what Winnipeg has done all season to the teams that they've played. Diane, I'm also not disappointed tonight. Sure did not look too good in parts of the game. Too many penalties, and they have a darn good goalie. Yeah, I'm just not. I just refuse to go down particular roads, considering that the Wild had a expected goal share that they did, which is, like I said, it's a number I haven't seen for a long time. They put in the shots that they needed. Connor Hellebuyck just stopped them all. This team needs to win games against the top Central teams. That's what it is. Yeah, it's just, we'd like to see 1 or 2 so I don't have to keep repeating that they haven't beaten Winnipeg or Dallas since the 2022-2023 season, and I think Dallas is even longer than that. I would like to get rid of those so I don't have to keep talking about them. Brock Nelson could make all the difference. One good scoring piece, and it might surprise us. And they had Marcus Johansson on the third line tonight. He was playing for a bit with Gaudreau and with, I think, Foligno. So he's capable of it. It would just deepen the team, I think. And it's one of those things that the team will dictate as the next 2 months unfold. I'm not even gonna dignify the Marco Rossi trade talk at this point anymore, because it's getting a bit much, and I know you guys don't want to hear about it, and so I'm not even gonna. If for some reason it would happen, of course we'll react to it, but I'm not going to devote my energy to talking about something that nobody that listens to this show wants. I don't want it. And it just, I would much rather put my energy, I can't put my energy into that at all. Like, just no thank you. No, thank you. Let's see what else. Actually, what we're going to do here, I've been forgetting to do this the last couple of shows, and I need to. So we're going to sneak in a quick break here, and then we'll get back to your comments. We'll get back to your reaction. We'll get back to your thoughts after the Minnesota Wild lose tonight by a score of 5-1 to the Winnipeg Jets. More of tonight's Locked On Wild postcast is coming up after this. Tonight's Locked On Wild postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Tonight's Locked On Wild postcast is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Do you think Kirill Kaprizov will get more than 1/2 goal next week? Do you think Matt Boldy will do the same? You can cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this hockey season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Welcome back to tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. Minnesota Wild again fall to the Winnipeg Jets, this time by a score of 4-1. Let's hear from Trav. No knee-jerk reactions from me. No Zook. Kirill coming off injury, not 100%. Murat injured. Lauko left the game injured. Thought Boldy played well and Freddie played well. We had guys I have never heard of. Not wrong there. It's a regular season game. It's a test that you would like to pass. But again, like it's all part of the entirety of the regular season is a build-up process to the postseason. If you put yourself in position to be able to lock up a spot, good for you. If you have to fight all the way through it, then that's another route that teams take. But games 22 or game 21 for the Minnesota Wild, for instance, a valuable lesson that is something that the team has struggled with over the last couple of seasons is losing your composure in playoff type games. It happened tonight. That Joel Eriksson Ek play again led to the go-ahead goal and what ended up being the game-winning goal. And I don't fault Trenin for trying to help get that sorted out. But the key thing is that by Trenin helping Eriksson Ek sort that out, the Wild had 3 other players on the ice, and that led to a 4-on-3 that Winnipeg took advantage of to score their goal. Situational awareness, and that is something I'm sure John Hines is going to point out in the film session, but it's a good indicator of the things that happen that usually affect the outcome of playoff games. That's the lesson. That's the takeaway here. That's the thing that the Wild need to put in the back of their heads moving past tonight is you have to be aware of what's going on and what you do and the impact that it could have on the rest of the game. Do you really have faith in Billy G to build a winning franchise? Jury's still out on him. The underdevelopment of Iowa players has me concerned. Not wrong. The Iowa stuff is really starting to kind of worry me a tad because Jesper got rocked again, gave up 5 goals. I'm of the belief I don't think it's all his doing. I think the team in front of him just is not playing enough structured hockey that I think what you need, I think you need to take a big swing and go get somebody that's got some coaching experience. Brett McLean was always kind of a player's coach because he played in the NHL. And he was an assistant on the staffs that he was because of his ability to relate to players, much like Darby Hendrickson. But we're seeing pretty clearly that there just isn't enough structure. There isn't enough development going on for those Iowa Wild players. And so on one hand, I kind of worry about that. But on the other hand, they are very young still. I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it 2,000 more times. The light clicks on for everybody at different times. There's no book. There's no manual. Everybody figures out how to play professionally on their own schedule. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I think some of that is going on. I do think a large part of it is just not getting a good amount of, I don't know, a scheme. But it's hard to say. It is, I think, interesting as well because the prospects that we're really looking at from that Iowa group right now are on the defensive side. And I think Zeev Buium is going to lap all of them in getting to the NHL before any of them do. You'd think that'd be fuel, but I don't know. Here we are still talking about Iowa still trying to dig out of a slow start. Swiffer T Wetjet Mop joining us here tonight. Going to see Connor Hellebuyck in my nightmares. So will the rest of the Minnesota Wild. Here's an interesting point from John Hines in the postgame. Michael Russo just tweeting this out. John Hines on Trenton's decision to help Eriksson Ek, which led to the 4-on-3 down low and the game-winning goal. He said, I think there's some discussion points we can have on that situation. So I think he is going to have the same reaction to that, or had the same reaction to that as we all did, as I did. You got to know what's going on. And again, I'm not going to rip Trenton for standing up for Joel Eriksson Ek. I'm just not. But it's a situational thing. You just have to understand what's going on in the game at that moment, because Winnipeg knew what was going on and they took advantage of it. What do you think about the St. Louis coaching fiasco? Funny you should ask. I gave a good amount of thoughts on the Locked On NHL show, which will be posting early tomorrow morning. But what I will say, stinks for Drew Bannister to lose his job because another guy got fired, and you like the guy that got fired better than you like your own coach. Nothing that Bannister did. It's not a great St. Louis roster. And it's the same thing that got Montgomery fired in Boston. It's not a great roster. So the coaches are paying the price for the GM's doing. And so I thought Bannister was doing a fine job with what he had to work with. But evidently the brass in St. Louis had different plans, and they went and got the bigger name to try to spin what has been a rough start for them so far this season. Hopefully, BG doesn't wait until the deadline. Feels like he always has a November or December trade up his sleeve. And I think he's going to pounce this year with what is coming in the offseason with Kirill and what's coming next season. Well, I feel like he's going to try to be opportunistic. I feel like he's hopefully going to pounce as opposed to waiting for somebody else to make a move. Only like rentals when you feel like you're one of the favorites, but how do you determine that? I think some of the things that we discussed in the show, the defense that the Wild have played so far this year, not a mirage. The goaltending has been great for most of the season. You need offense to kind of help complement that. And Brock Nelson is not just an offensive player. He can add some defense to the mix too. And he's winning faceoffs at a 56% clip. I know we don't necessarily you have to weigh the importance that you put on faceoffs, but 56% would be the tops on the Minnesota Wild by far. And the Wild have struggled in key games to win faceoffs. So that would be another appealing option that you could have, that you could put in to this mix, and just adds depth. It adds depth. It adds versatility. It gives John Hines another guy that can take a faceoff late in a game. Even if he comes here and plays mostly wing, you can still throw him in for a faceoff. I like the versatility it would create. I like the depth it would create. But again, that's on Billy to That's on Billy to make the move and decide what is a fair price to pay and what isn't. Can we change divisions? Well, as long as we go to the Pacific, because I don't know, it's funny. The Wild would be leading the Atlantic Division right now. They would be third in the Metropolitan, and they would be tied with Vegas in the Pacific. Probably the Atlantic. Definitely don't want the Metropolitan. Steer clear of that. I don't know. I feel like the Central is not a bad spot to be because you can rack up wins against St. Louis, Utah. Hopefully can get a couple against Nashville and can get back on track against Chicago. We'll see. Brian with some great points here. Kirill was a tinge off. Ek needs to start getting some points. 90 plays when he wants. Yeah, that's why we need a more consistent option in the top six. Rossi for Besser or Nelson straight up. Are you pulling the trigger? No. Nope. Not a chance. I wouldn't. There's about a list of, I don't know, 10 players in which I would even consider it. But here are the let's talk about Besser now, because Brock Nelson is a tried and true rental. His contract is done after this season is up. So you can trade for him. You don't necessarily have to have him on the books. Brock Besser, same thing. His contract is done at the end of this season. But I think he is on the top of Craig Leopold's list in terms of free agent targets once the season is done. So I would wait on Besser because Vancouver right now they've slipped to 5th. They were in a playoff spot for a while. They do still have a couple of games in hand on everybody else. They've got 3 games in hand on Edmonton, Calgary, and Vegas. So if you win 4 of those, all of a sudden you have 27 points and you're back in second. Unless they're out of it, I don't think Brock Besser's going anywhere, which is where Brock Nelson comes back into play. Because now the New York Islanders, they are 4 points behind the Rangers. They're in 6th place. They're tied with the Flyers. They're 1 point clear of the Blue Jackets and 3 points clear of the Penguins. That's not the spot where you want to be in that division. They have a negative goal differential. They are 4-3-3 in their last 10 games. They are under 500 on the road and at home. That's not a team that's going places. That is an old roster that needs some retooling. Maybe you can get one of those picks off the board and give them a prospect. That's the route I would go. And then you take your chances with Brock Besser and the rest of the free agents, the rest of the market. You take your chances with him in the offseason. Because I don't think that Vancouver's going to just let him go. I'll answer that another day, Optics. I just don't see the appeal for trading a 22-year-old. So I'm not going to dive too much further into that. Why didn't we keep Nino? Can't even remember anymore. Well, that was a previous blunder by Mr. Chuck Fletcher, who decided that Victor Rask, or was that Paul Fenton? I can't remember. Because you got the Granlund for Fiala trade, and then you have Nino for Rask. I think are the 2 trades. I get them mixed up half the time. That worked out great. Super, super fun Really, really good work on the part of the Minnesota Wild GMs at that point. Aside from Hellebuyck, are they really that good of a team? Talent-wise, etc., they're deep. They're very deep, and they play very disciplined, but it's just about keeping up with them. This is anytime you play a team that is on that type of a run, they said it in the broadcast. You just got to get them to blink. And the Wild blinked first. They got behind, and that's when Winnipeg puts the clamps on. It's like a python wrapping around your leg. Once they get that advantage, get that hold, they start to increase their grip. And the next thing you know, you look up and you're on the wrong end. Ralphie Boy joining us. Just got home from Xcel. Would have preferred to watch the Wild play a full 60 minutes. So would all of us. But seems like the players in Iowa are not that great. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Iowa. Yeah. Jets. I like this from Britt. The Jets play dual man coverage, full court press. Corey. Jets have 4 great lines. They're a deep team. And their play so far this year, it's not a fluke. They have been pretty lucky on the injury front, which has helped them as well. But it's not a 22 game season. It's an 82 game season. There's a lot that can happen in 60 games, good or bad. That could be the case for both the Minnesota Wild and the Winnipeg Jets. Teams have gotten off to great starts and fizzled. Teams have gotten up to terrible starts and gone on runs. It's an entire process. The 82 game season is a process. You learn things, you do things early that you don't do later. It's all learning. It's all developments and adjustments. Yeah. End of the day, Winnipeg showed why they're in first place. They just put the clamps on. Put the clamps on in the third period, and they went and got 2 points on the road. That's all it is tonight. And like I said, the thing that I take away from this game is the Minnesota Wild learned a valuable lesson that good teams, if you have a lapse in composure, good teams will get you for it. And Winnipeg did. And that's the takeaway tonight. Like it was a close game until the final 5 minutes or so. The Wild attacked a ton early, kind of lost it a little bit as the game wore on. Rinse and move on. Beat Chicago on Friday. Or wait, no, we play Buffalo. Why do I keep thinking that it's well, I guess that shows you what getting like 2.5 hours of sleep for 3 weeks every night does to the human brain. That's a great case study on getting sleep, folks. Get your full 9 hours or 8 or whatever you need, because otherwise it turns your brain into Jell-O pudding that just got left out in the sun. Buffalo Sabres on Wednesday. So just go get 2 points against Buffalo. Buffalo is a very beatable team. Buffalo is 11-9-1 so far this season. Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck. These are the names we know. We know what Buffalo is going to try to do. Lindy Ruff, Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck, Rasmus Dahlin. Guess what their goaltending's doing so far this year? 3.1 goals allowed per game, .899 save percentage. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's been pretty good. James Reimer's played 1 game. Devin Levy has played 7. He's been awful. Go attack a goalie. Take the attack that you had against Connor Hellebuyck in the first period and turn that into a win. Extend it through the game. Learn from this. That's all you can ask. Learn from what happened tonight and apply it to Wednesday's game and go get 2 points. That's all there is to it. I'm exhausted. So I think that's going to do it for tonight's postcast. Glad to get behind the mic once again for this one. Unfortunately, the Wild could not come away with a win, but they'll live to fight another day, and so will we. So make sure to hit the like button before you head out here for the night, and stay tuned, as tomorrow we'll have a special PWHL edition of Locked On Wild with my friend Alexis Pearson. So tune in for that, as well as more reaction to this game. We'll get John Hines' comments after tonight's game. We'll talk about that play with Trennan, because I'm sure there'll be a little follow-up in the morning. And appreciate everybody tuning in, as you always do. Minnesota Wild on the wrong end of a 4-1 loss here tonight's cast. We've also got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.